Like, if they're gonna be the two worst people on the planet, at least they're together and not ruining anybody else's lives. Hello, my name is Adriana and this is my December monthly reading wrap-up. As per usual, we will start with stats. If you like these kind of stats, be sure to check out my video from last week where I covered all of 2023 yearly stats, but this will just be for the month of December. So starting with, I read a total of 10 books in the month of December, totaling up to 2,259 eyeball reads, 29.5 hours worth of audiobooks, and the average length of my eyeball reads was 322.7 pages. And my average rating for the whole month was 3.6. which is meh. You can see my ratings breakdown here. Most of what I read was right around that 4-star range, and then I opted not to rate one of my books. Here you can see my format breakdown. Most of what I read being ebook, a couple audiobook, a couple physical reads. Pretty even breakdown. And then I sourced most of these books from the library. I had bought 2 of them in the last couple months. I had owned one of them for a while, and then one of them I got from the publisher. And finally, my genre breakdown for the month. I was a fantasy girly this month. Lots of fantasy. And then 1 romance and 1 sci-fi. So before I jump into the book by book breakdown, please consider liking and commenting on this video and subscribing to my channel if you like bookish things. So the first book I finished in December was What the River Knows. I got this as a NetGalley ARC. It was fine. It ended up being YA. I thought when I originally read the description of the book that it was going to be adult. I need to pay better attention when I'm going on my NetGalley sprees because it literally says at the bottom, below the little picture of the cover, that it's YA. And I just don't really vibe with YA the same way I used to. It's fun. It's got archaeology, which is a trope I love. Very light fantasy, I would say. It's got more kind of magical elements than a full, magic system fantasy world setting. And I guess at the time I rated it 4 stars, but thinking back on it, I'd probably put it closer to a 3. It was just kind of there. Although I think the ending was really good, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't know. It's fine. It's fine. It's a good book. It is a series. Not sure if I will continue on or not. I'll probably wait to see a couple reviews come out before I decide. The next book I finished was The Anomaly. This was for the Shelf This Book Club, and I just 100% missed the live show on this, so I'm gonna have to go back and watch the live show because I read this specifically for the book club. This is a sci-fi story where we follow a ton of different perspectives of people who board this plane, and then the plane goes through kind of a big storm situation, and then it kind of freaks a lot of people out. They land. The people who get off kind of change their life, or they're just heavily impacted by this flight and how scary it was to go through that really bad storm. And then I think 3 or 4 months later, the same plane lands again with all of the same people, and it causes a societal kerfuffle. I don't want to say a societal collapse, but it affects a lot of people very deeply. Especially the people who now have a duplicate. And so this book just really explores how each person reacts to this new situation, as well as kind of how different parts of society react to this weird situation. It was really fun to kind of go through it. I definitely should have read this with my eyeballs rather than as an audiobook because it is kind of hard to keep so many characters straight. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Kind of averagely. I ended up giving it 3 stars. So it's got a very interesting premise. I would recommend checking it out if you are interested in said premise. Next up, I actually have a physical copy of the book I read, and that is When Women Were Dragons. I was so excited for this book and enjoying it so much through the first half, but it just kind of petered out for me, I guess. The premise is so cool. It takes place in 1950s America, and it is much the same as our world, except sometimes when women have big emotions, like big rage, they spontaneously turn into dragons. And it is kind of this known secret. Not really a secret, but it is actively suppressed in society and hidden away. And it's so cool and such an interesting premise. And we follow one character specifically through her life as she kind of deals with different people she knows turning into dragons, certain people not turning into dragons, her life being kind of a mess because she's a young girl in the 50s. I really enjoyed the premise, I enjoyed the characters, but it just felt like it would have been better suited to like a novella and not necessarily a full novel, because it just didn't really, it introduced a really cool idea and a really cool concept, but didn't really do anything with it as far as a full novel with a full plot. As much as I love it, I had to give it a 4 because I just felt like it didn't really do anything with its premise. The next book I read was Wayward, and actually When Women Were Dragons and Wayward I read as a part of the same vlog, so I will link the vlog here and down below, and you can check out that for more in-depth thoughts. But Wayward, quite the opposite to When Women Were Dragons. I was kind of meh on it at the start, but the ending is what really cinched it in for me as a 5-star. This book is so good. It follows 3 generations of women from the same family, one in 1619, one in 1942, and one in 2019, and how they are affected by their family's ties to magic. And it is a beautiful story of overcoming adversity and believing in yourself and feminine power as it relates to nature and magic, and I just really loved it. It was so good. Yeah, easy 5 stars. I am obsessed with this book. It is so good. I need to buy a physical copy of it because I borrowed it from the library because I didn't think I was going to love it, and now I do love it, and I need a physical manifestation. The next book I finished was The Hidden Oracle. This was technically a reread for me. I physically read it when it first came out in 2016, but then kind of didn't finish the series, and with Squash That Series happening currently, I wanted to reintroduce myself to the series so I could read the books that I haven't read yet. So like I said, this was a reread for me. Definitely enjoyed it. I tend to not enjoy the expanded Percy Jackson universe as much because I did pretty much I read the Kane Chronicles as they came out. I obviously read Percy Jackson as it came out, Heroes of Olympus, and then I read this one when it came out, but my enjoyment tends to taper off because I'm just not the target audience of these books. I was the target audience of Percy Jackson when it came out because I was 11, and so that worked out really well for me. I was an 11-year-old obsessed with Greek mythology. Percy Jackson was an 11-year-old thrust into the world of Greek mythology. I enjoyed it. I'm continuing on with the series. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. I guess explaining what these books are, this is, like I'd mentioned, another spin-off series of the Percy Jackson universe. This one is about Apollo, who is being punished for his part in causing the issues of the last series, Heroes of Olympus, and he has been banished to the mortal realm by Zeus to be immortal until he proves himself to Zeus in order to become a god again. So this is the trials of Apollo as he is immortal and dealing with being immortal. A mortal, not immortal. Being a mortal. It's a good time. The next book I finished was The Friend Zone. I picked this up because I was looking for another semi-quick audiobook to squeeze in before I started reading for Squash That Series. I had read Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez before and really, really enjoyed that. So when I saw this was available immediately at my library, I scooped it right up. But I hated the main love interests of this book. These were the 2 worst people I had ever met. And honestly, I'm just so glad that both of their exes aren't with them anymore. Like, these people are the worst. The main character, Kristen, is definitely like the cool girl and does this whole thing about the main conflict as to why they can't be together is that the main guy, I'm blanking on his name, really wants to have kids, and Kristen, at the beginning of the book, is in a full committed relationship. So that's reason number one. So she's just emotionally cheating on her deployed boyfriend, for the first 30% of the book. And he seems like a swell guy. I don't understand. Anyway, she is emotionally cheating on him for like this full deployment while he's out with the main guy. The main guy really, really wants a big family. Kristen has uterine fibroids that keeps her from being able to have kids. So even after she and her boyfriend break up, she decides she still can't be with the main guy. Is his name Joe? Maybe. I can't remember. Because he has said he wants a really big family, and she's like, well, I can't get pregnant. But she just never tells him that. She's like, oh, I don't want to make like this decision for him. But then she later decides, well, maybe I should just get back with my ex and make that decision for him, that he can be with someone who's not in love with him. It makes no sense. And she's a terrible person. And the guy is also a terrible person who has all of these misogynistic tendencies of no, they're not bad people. They're not out here murdering people, but they're just people I would not want to associate myself with. I have met these people in real life and do not like them. And much prefer people like Kristen's ex, again, can't remember his name, who's just chill and just wants to be with his person no matter what. And then Kristen's out here being a crazy person, making all these decisions for the people around her without communicating. And then there's also the last third of the book kind of focuses around the death of another really big character, and that's just not really a trope I like to see utilized in a romance novel. Fridging a character for other characters' development just never really sit right with me. But I gave this book 2 stars. And I am going to continue on with the rest of the series because Abby Jimenez is just such a good writer. She wrote these 2 characters that I hate, and I still enjoyed their spicy scenes, and I still wanted them to be together at the end. Mostly to save the rest of society from them. If they're gonna be the 2 worst people on the planet, at least they're together and not ruining anybody else's lives. The next book I finished was The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. I actually had a goal of reading this for this year and decided to pick it up in December and bust through it, and I am very glad I did. I really enjoyed all of the characters. I enjoy this world. I had a really good time. I ended up giving it 3 stars mostly because epic fantasy is just not really something I find myself having a huge amount of enjoyment in, but I'd still like to read them every once in a while. I don't know, it's kind of a weird setup where it's I just like to read a lot of different things, and sometimes I gotta throw in something that isn't typically tailored to my taste just to mix it up a little bit, which this definitely did mix it up quite a bit. And I would like to read The Hunger of the Gods at some point when I again reach one of those points where I just need to mix up my reading. The next book I finished was in preparation for Squash That series, and that was volume 1 of The Wicked and the Divine. This is a series of graphic novels that I've been wanting to read for a while. It is based on tons of different pantheons of mythology where people are kind of put on Earth as an incarnate of different gods, and then it is revealed that they are that god, but they only live for 2 years in that human body, and then they die. I don't know, this is my only thing with graphic novels is I feel sometimes they just kind of throw you into a world without really much explanation or info dumping. I'm a big fan of the info dump. I want you to just tell me what's going on, and then I'll be good to go. And that's not always as prevalent in the graphic novel form. They do a lot more work through dialogue when I a lot of times would just like a full paragraph of text explaining to me what's happening. But I think after this first volume, I kind of have it. As I go through the rest of the volumes, it will probably become more clear to me, but I enjoyed it. It's got a lot of like mystery, intrigue. One of the gods seems to be like a bad guy. There seems to be some cover-ups going on. It's got a lot of good stuff going on. The next book I finished in December was another NetGalley arc. The next book I finished was another NetGalley arc, and this was the first volume of the Asgardian series by George O'Connor, and this one is about Odin. So I kind of did some more research into this comic book writer after I read this one, and he has previously done a series on the Olympians where there's 12 volumes and he goes through each Greek god in the Olympian pantheon and kind of their stories and whatnot, and this does the same thing for Odin in Norse mythology, which was really cool for me because I've always wanted to get more into Norse mythology, but I don't think I've ever had the right resource to really grab my attention. I've talked about this before, but my journey with Greek mythology started with Delory's book of Greek myths when I was a child. It's got tons of like really beautiful illustrations, and like every time I try to get into Norse mythology, I usually just start trying to read like either myths online or like from a reference book, and I think I really need that visual to really engage me into a mythology, and I just didn't realize that because I had just so innately had that with Greek mythology from when I was a young kid that I didn't have that same experience with Norse mythology, and now I can enjoy Greek mythology without the visuals because I already have those visuals in my brain. So I need to establish that, I think, with Norse mythology. So hopefully this series will help with that, and I can get more into that and have another, hyperfixation in mythology. But I think these are very well researched and put together. At the end of the graphic novel, he calls it kind of like a behind the scenes like DVD commentary type deal, but he goes through like panel by panel of why he made certain decisions, why he chose to write out the story the way he did or draw out something the way he did, and I think that's just really cool and is a great educational tool. And then the final book I finished up 2023 with was Volume 5 of Lore Olympus. So this was the first book I read for Squash That series. Because I am on the West Coast, Squash That series actually started at 10 p.m. for me. So I started reading this at 10 p.m. on the 31st, finished it before midnight. So this is technically my last read of 2023, even though it's being counted for a readathon in 2024. Little bit confusing, but it is what it is. Like I said, another installment of Lore Olympus. Obsessed with this series. Love this art style. I always get the Barnes & Noble edition because they have a little bit of extra stuff going on in the back that I really enjoy. I think the covers have been a little more consistent with the Barnes & Noble editions too, as far as like the color story. I think the regular edition of Volume 5 is like totally different color-wise, and I appreciate that Barnes & Noble has been very consistent. So they look very good on a shelf together, because I am planning on continuing on and buying these and having a whole collection. I guess if you don't know what Lore Olympus is, I'm not going to be the one to tell you. It is one of the biggest graphic novels out right now. So those are all the books I read in December. Please let me know what your favorite read of the last month of 2023